So now we're going to study the relationship between the temperaments and the character, because as I told you, we build character on temperament. So the temperament is the biological aspect of our life, and the character is a spiritual one. Let's see a little bit about what's temperament. We've been speaking a lot about character. Now I want to speak a little bit about temperament for you to have a clearer idea of what this is about. Human personality is fundamentally made up of temperament and character. And we have to make a clear distinction between one and the other. Temperament is given to us by nature. Unlike character, which is acquired by education and made lasting by habit, temperament is the pattern of inclinations and reactions that proceed from the physiological constitution of an individual. It's our native predisposition to react in certain ways. Temperament may be choleric or melancholic, sanguine or phlegmatic. We are born with our temperament and we cannot change it. We die with the qualities and defects of our temperament. That's a basic truth. You're okay with that? I'm just giving now you information before entering the heart of the topic. On the foundation of temperament, we build character. Character is made up of virtues. The most fundamental virtues are prudence, courage, self-control, justice, magnanimity, and humility. Virtues are spiritual qualities acquired through training. We are not born with character. It is something we build. Through character, we learn to act in ways that may be contrary to our temperament. Through character, we may do the opposite of what comes naturally, because what's come naturally is often far from being excellent. An example about the prudent person. I told you a choleric who is action-oriented, he naturally makes a decision, but he does not naturally deliberate. So through character, he will deliberate. Okay, so he will do through character the thing that he biologically does not do. The choleric temperament is marked by quick, intense, and sustained reactivity. I repeat it. Choleric is marked by quick, intense, and sustained reactivity. Reactivity to what? Reactivity to external stimuli. The melancholic temperament is marked by slow, deep, and sustained reactivity. Just stop a second here. What's the difference between choleric and melancholic? Choleric is quick, very quick in his reactions to external stimuli. The melancholy is very slow in his reactions, very slow. Things come in slowly in a melancholy. But the melancholy is very deep in his reactions, which means that when the stimuli comes in, it turns around in the heart, in the mind, in the spirit a lot. It goes very deep in the person. What characterizes a choleric is the intensity. It's not the depth. Choleric are not necessarily deep people. They are intense. Melancholies are deep people, but not necessarily intense. And they are slow. The sanguine temperament is marked by quick, spontaneous, and ephemeral reactivity. The sanguine is quick, very spontaneous, but his reactivity is ephemeral, which means that after a good night, he doesn't remember what happened yesterday. We'll speak about this interesting temperament. The phlegmatic temperament is marked by slow, restraint, and ephemeral reactivity. The phlegmatic are deep, passionate people. They are very slow in their reactions, and at the same time they look without passions. So they are very restrained in their reactions. And ephemeral, which means the stimuli, external stimuli don't have much impact on them on the long term. So we're going to see now we're going to see after that what's the consequence in terms of character, what's the challenge for each temperament. The choleric is action-oriented. The melancholy is idea-oriented. The phlegmatic is peace-oriented, and the sanguine is people-oriented. You will see this now when I explain it a bit more. But keep in mind those four things, they help you very much. Action, idea, peace, people. And these are biological things. When we're speaking about this, we are not making a moral statement about people. It's neutral. It's biological. There is a language for biology, and there is a language for spirituality. These are not the same word. A phlegmatic is not a lazy. You got my point. A lazy, it's a sin. Laziness is a sin. Phlegma is not a sin. It's a biological reality. And God wants it. God wants certain people to be phlegmatic. He has created them that way, which means He likes them that way. But God doesn't like laziness because it's a sin. You understand the difference? There is a vocabulary for both, and you must not confuse. Yes?
Can you describe ephemeral again?
Ephemeral means that it's not for a long term. It's just for a while. It can be a few hours. For instance, the sanguine people, they're very excited by any kind of project. And for some people, it can be 5 minutes. The excitement is incredible. It's ephemeral. The next day, they've forgotten that they had an incredible project in their mind the day before. Melancholies are not like this at all. They can be doing years with one project, one idea. The sanguine needs 10 ideas per day to be excited. You see? This is what we call ephemeral. Ephemeral means that it's not going to last. It's not going to last.
Can you be multiple?
Only Jesus Christ was multiple.
Well, but just kidding.
Here is the multiple guy. This is the multiple guy. He's called Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ possessed the specific strength of each temperament. He ate and drank with sinners and told parables in a way only sanguines can do that. He spoke to the woman caught in adultery in a way only phlegmatics can do that. He drove the money changers out of the temple in a way only cholerics can do that. He prayed in a way only melancholies can pray. Jesus was a perfect man, so he had all the qualities of all those temperaments, but he had not the defects of those temperaments. That's a great thing. So when people ask, what's the temperament of Jesus Christ? It's impossible to know. But he had a temperament. He had all those temperaments. He had a biological strength of all those temperaments. I repeat, he was eating with those guys and telling parables only like a sanguine can do that. The way he drove those guys out of the temple, well, I don't see a phlegmatic doing those things. Unthinkable. Unthinkable. Even if you want it, you can't. You would go against your biological nature. While Jesus Christ, when he listened to those guys who wants to kill that poor woman caught in adultery, his silence, his way of behaving during those minutes, the choleric would not have stand that 5 seconds. Which means that he has an attitude which only phlegmatic people can handle. You know, when you're angry, you're wrath, you see hypocrisy around you, and you keep silent. Phlegmatic can do those things, but Choleric people cannot handle that, even with a very strong character. So this is an important thing. Thank you for the question. Come back to what I was saying here. If the father and mother are of different temperaments, the children may inherit the different temperaments. It may happen that in one person, two temperaments are so mixed that both are equally strong. However, on occasion of ordeals or difficulties, one of the temperaments will manifest itself predominantly. So fundamentally, the temperament is not going to change. But what happens is that we can be in certain circumstances, in certain countries, in which an aspect of our because we normally have two temperaments: a basic temperament and a secondary temperament. You will see this. It can happen that it's almost 50-50. But then, in a special circumstances where you could be educated in a country, where you can be educated and raised, one of the two is becoming stronger than the other. This is something that can happen. But fundamentally, the temperament is not going to change. Look, you're somewhere here. You're somewhere here. You can be an M, an MP, a PM, a P, a PS, an SPS. What you cannot be, it's an MS and a CP or a PC. Because these are opposite temperaments. So you cannot be a melancholy and a sanguine at the same time. This really doesn't fit. You would explode. And you cannot be a choleric and a phlegmatic at the same time. It's impossible. These are opposite temperaments. So you have a basic temperament and you have a secondary temperament. It's not usual to see people with only the basic temperament. It's not usual. In Slavic Russia, the dominating temperament is the melancholic one. In Spain, the choleric. In Italy, the sanguine. In Finland, the phlegmatic. In many countries, there is no dominating temperament. For instance, in the US and France, because of the melting pot. It's something biological. When you have an incredible melting pot, you have everything. In Finland, there is no melting pot at all. And I can tell you, I've been living there for 18 years. The majority of people are really phlegmatic, with all the positive and negative aspects of it. In Russia, you have a lot of melancholies. Russia gave the world artists, painters, musicians, writers. It's typical of the melancholies. Very deep people, but not oriented towards action, oriented toward the idea. Spain, a lot of choleric people. Don Quixote de la Mancha. Cholerism is very spread out over Spain. What you have in America is you have a specific culture. So don't mix up the things. It's not something biological. This culture of action that you have in the US is linked not to your biological temperament, it's linked to a specific culture, the American dream. So you're doers because people came to America to do things, not to think. Sorry, not to think, not to write books. They came to America to move forward, to build, to do. So the culture that you have here is a culture of action, but it has nothing to do with the biology of the American people, because in America you have a lot of different biological people. So one thing is the biological temperament that you have, another thing is a general culture that is a part of the American dream, or that has to do with the American dream. So you have to be capable of making the distinction, and that's it. And you have people that fit very much, the cholerics fit very much the American dream, and those who are melancholies maybe don't fit so much the American dream, but it doesn't mean that they are not Americans. You follow me? Biology, culture, these are different things. Okay, let's go further. Positive tendencies of the choleric. We're going to study shortly the choleric. The choleric have positive tendencies that are enthusiasm, energy, decisiveness. He's self-confident. He's aware of his talents. What I'm saying he is, keep in mind, I want to say he is prone to, he tends to. Because many of those guys that are cholerics are not like this at all. So, because their character is weak or strong, we'll see. But this is a tendency, a biological tendency of the choleric. Enthusiasm, energy, decisiveness, self-confidence, awareness of his talents. He's eminently rational and pragmatic. He's a natural entrepreneur and organizer. He gets many things started. He's a natural manager. He gets many things done in a short time. He's comfortable with power and blossoms in competition. Many people say, well, these are the natural leaders. I say, no, these are the natural managers. People made a complete confusion. There is no natural leader. There are natural managers. These are biological managers and entrepreneurs. They like to get things started. They like to manage things. They like to achieve goals. They like to compete. They like to produce energy. They like action. These are what we call managers. These guys don't have more quality or capacity for leadership than the others. But they have more capacity for management. That's right. Much more. They like to achieve goals. It's a part of their biological structure. But they have defects. He is prone to pride, anger, hatred. He is prone to rashness, which means precipitation in decision or action. He tends not to recognize his mistakes. He is prone to blind activism. He tends to be confrontational and dictatorial. He tends to be insensitive and roll over his co-workers' feelings to accomplish the task at hand. He doesn't take the time to mold, convince, or teach the people he is in charge of. These are biological tendencies. The melancholy, positive tendencies, deep, reflective, contemplative. The guy you see here in the picture is Hamlet. It's a Hamlet. It's not a very famous English Hamlet, but I think it's a Danish actor, very famous in the 1930s. Idealistic. He longs for perfection. He is orderly and diligent. He is easily consistent, faithful, patient, and persistent. He can handle the big crisis with grace and aplomb. He is self-motivated. He doesn't respond to the promise of reward, nor the threat of punishment. These are the positive tendencies of the melancholics. Just see now the negative tendencies. He tends to be self-absorbed. He fears action in which human imperfection becomes manifest. He tends to be pessimistic, to magnify difficulties. He doesn't like to run risks. He's extremely moody. He tends to be a bad team player. Tends to be critical or judgmental of others. He tends to be overly sensitive, susceptible, and unforgiving. These are the negative tendencies of the melancholies. When you hear those things, you already begin to understand what are going to be the challenges in terms of virtues. But now I just show you the temperaments so that you get an idea about what the temperaments are. The sanguine, what are his positive tendencies? He enjoys people and wants to make them happy. He's friendly, outgoing, communicative. He's warm-hearted, compassionate, generous. He is creative, enterprising, and adventuresome. He is very attuned to his five senses, which gives him a good eye for detail. Negative tendencies of the sanguine. He is prone to superficiality and inconstancy. Fun tends to be his fundamental motivation. His attention is easily captured by something new. He's eager to please and wants everyone to love him. He is often tempted to forsake what he knows is right in order to fit in with the crowd. He is very attuned to his five senses. He is overly drawn to sensible pleasures and external attractions. The phlegmatic these are Nicolas Gogol's famous people of the dead souls. The dead soul Sabakevich. He exhibits a scientific approach to reality. He is an excellent listener, has great empathy for others. He has a strong sense of obligation and cooperation. He possesses a hidden will of iron. He is constant, loyal, persevering. He is not easily insulted or provoked to anger. He can stay calm under pressure. Negative tendencies of the phlegmatic. He loves the status quo, security, routine. He is indecisive and terrified of doing things wrong. He wants to avoid conflict at all costs. He feels a deep-rooted unease about asserting himself. He is prone to passiveness. We'll come back to those things when we will study now the relationship with the character, so don't worry. I just wanted to see certain things. So it's important to know our temperament well. We need to discover our natural strength in order to multiply them, and our natural weaknesses in order to overcome them by practicing the opposite virtue. Our temperament inclines us in one direction or another. The choleric is inclined to do things, not to care for people. The melancholy is inclined to contemplate ideas and experiences, not to take action. The sanguine is inclined to communicate with people, not to put the last stone to his many projects. The phlegmatic is inclined to deliberate, not to dream of great endeavors. You see the inclination. You have an inclination. And this inclination is biological. And it's a reality in your life. Remember this beautiful sentence. Our temperament inclines us in one direction or another. If we know this, many things will be clear for us and we will understand ourselves much better. Our physiological inclinations can be balanced by virtue. Cholerics need to practice humility and care for people. Melancholies need to practice audacity and take action. Sanguines need to practice endurance and finish the job. Phlegmatics need to practice magnanimity and dream of great things. We do not all climb the same slope toward the summit of perfection. The slope depends on the temperament. You follow me? Yeah, we don't have the same struggles. And the struggle depends on what is our temperament. So the importance of this is to show you that you don't begin your fight for character from ground zero. You have already something. It is a biological temperament that pushes you in one direction or another. And you have to be aware of that because it helps you understand who you are and what are the virtues you're challenged by and what are the things that you do easily and you could think it's virtue when in fact it's biological energy. And then you must not be so proud of you. Because you do those things easily by biology, not because you're a great guy.
The person's been striving to be virtuous. Do these temperaments become less noticeable than others?
He asked me if the temperaments become less noticeable when you grow in virtue. My answer is, it depends on people. You have very virtuous people, well, their temperament is immediately visible. I've known some choleric saints. In 3 seconds you got it. He's a choleric. But he's a saint. Because he practices virtue. What we say normally is that certain people, they find an incredible equilibrium in their lives, balance, through character, and then it's difficult to identify their temperament. My experience has been this is okay with certain people. But it doesn't mean that they are more sane than the others. Because sanctity is not a result, it's a process. It's a process based on what you have at the beginning. You see? For instance, the choleric saint will be all his life fighting against his anger. Because he's naturally angry. When things don't work well, he's naturally angry. So he will have to fight against it. And it's not a bad thing to see that he's fighting. To be a saint doesn't mean that you don't have flaws and that you're a perfect person. It means that you're fighting against your defects. And it's very good for us to see saints fighting against their defects, because then we understand they are like us. But when we see the kind of, phlegmatic person who is a saint, we don't see much the defects. Because the phlegmatic people, they don't bother us. They are so nice. They are so pleasant. They smile and you're happy with them. And they do nothing, but they can be saint and phlegmatic. Everybody loves the phlegmatic people, I promise you. And the phlegmatic saints, they are charming people. But the choleric saint is not a charming person. He's not a charming person.
So is there
I mean, all those people.
test that you take to figure out exactly where you fit in, like the Myers-Briggs or something?
Yeah, you can make a personality test, but remember one thing: when you make the personality test online, you be sure that you come to those 4 things, because very often you can take a test where you have only the qualities and you don't know what defects. I took once the cursor test and I discovered I was a champion. And then I read champions, was incredible. I'm a champion, Alex, look at that. You're a champion, you begin to read about you, you're a great man, you're incredible. There is no defect, you're perfect. This is what I am. 4% of people on earth are champions like me only. Well, incredible. And all the right thing about it is said, Jesus Christ. So feel-goodism, I felt very good after that. But after where are the defects? What is the thing I have to fight for? So the ancient Greeks had it very clear, because when they defined the temperament, you could see immediately the positive aspects and negative aspects of it. So when you take a test online, you have to be sure that it's a test on the 4 temperaments, or if it's not on the 4 temperaments, but on the 14 or the 16 or the 20 temperaments. I don't remember how we have in the Briggs-Meyer thing. You have to be sure that they show you also the problems. If not, how are you going to grow? So for many people, these tests are interesting on the psychological level, because then they understand better how to deal with other people. But I tell you, we are not here to understand how to deal with people. We are here to understand how to deal with ourselves in order to become better people. You see, our test is for self-improvement, not to understand how to deal with human beings, although it helps us a lot to understand how to deal with human beings. But if the objective of the test is just to understand the other and understand yourself, but not understand what are the things that you have to do in order to become a better person, it's feel-goodism. It's social and feel-goodism. It's feel-goodism because you're a good person, you understand I'm a great guy, look at my temperament, it's incredible what I am. And at the same time, it's social because it relates you to the others, to understand how to deal with them. So it's very manipulative. It's very often it's manipulative because you say, okay, this person, I have to relate with him like this because he's a sanguine, so I have to do those things to please him. So if your intention is good, it's okay. But you have a lot of people who use this in a very manipulative way. Because, okay, this guy's a sanguine, so take him from the other side. You know what I mean? Manipulation. They don't love the guy. They're not here to help him. They just say, okay, we know how he is, so take him that way, so he'll react this way, and then we got what we want. Many people love psychology in order to manipulate people, not in order to understand them and love them more. It's in order to use them. Psychology is a very preeminent science nowadays for manipulation, not for anthropological reasons, not in order to understand better the human being. It's in order to get things done. Management. We use people. So you can take online those. There are many tests online that are quite good and unreal. So you have percentages of the full temperaments in your life. If you see 50-50, 25-25, there is a problem. There is normally a big temperament and the secondary temperament. And the others two are very small percentage. Cannot be more than 10%. And you better take 3 or 4 to be sure it's okay. If they fit, if you take 3 or 4 and the results are exactly the opposite, then you better try to find another way to get to know your temperament. Yes, take a few to be sure they fit. If you see they don't fit, the results are absolutely inconsistent, then there is a problem. The second thing, when you take a test on temperament, be quick, because it's about your first reaction. It's not about your spirituality. So it's about your biological tendencies. So when you begin to think about, it's not a moral test. It's not about a judgment on your morality. It's a configuration of your biological structure. So think about your first impulsion and go quickly. Yeah, it's not moral, it's purely biological. So try to understand, okay, I have this tendency. Of course I fight against it, so normally I don't do those things. But in the deepest of my being, this is what I want to do. This is what you want to do? Okay, so say yes. Even if you don't do it. You see what I mean? But it's you feel you're brought to this. Okay. Yes.
I was just going to add, in my experience, is that Myers-Briggs is a very different instrument than the temperament thing. It's much more psychological. It's out of Jungian psychology. The temperaments really focus in on behaviors, and they measure different aspects of people. So they don't really equate. Done a lot of work with this and some other things. They're just different. So we do the temperament. Blanchard has a pretty good one out there. A couple other companies have some good ones, but they don't. You can't translate. You can't move from one to the other because they're different instruments measure different aspects of our personality, and our Myers-Briggs is much more psychological, whereas the temperaments are how do I behave? It's my first gut reaction to this, and so that's a caveat for those online things.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did you say this correlates to this in your opinion?
The disc instruments was one of the ones that the Blanchard company uses, and as you're going through the temperaments, I'm looking how the kind of language we use in that, the leaders, good shepherds. The only thing that I found strange is the scientific method. That's one thing, but all the rest of them, I mean, it's like the positive, the negative sides, almost word for word match up. It's very, very close to what you just put up on the screen here. So very, very, it's about behavior. Is there a temperament we're born with it? We just have to learn how to tame it sometimes. Or exercise it sometimes too. Sometimes we have to go to the positive.
Thank you, Father. So the spheres of the physiological and the spiritual have to be clearly differentiated. Physiological toughness, for instance, is not courage, although it can help us practice courage. Physiological apathy is not laziness, although it may facilitate laziness. Two extreme tendencies must be definitely avoided. One is to deny character, the other is to deny temperament. The first error can be called biologism, the second spiritualism. So those who deny the character, they will speak about biology, temperament, and they will say everything you do is determined by your biology. So no freedom, pure determinism, you're not responsible. You are doing what your biology tells you to do. This is an heresy. It's an heresy that denies the human spirit and denies human freedom. Okay? But on the opposite, you have people who deny temperament, the spiritualists, and they fall into a kind of voluntarism, and this is awful, which is, we can do everything. You are phlegmatic, no problem. Let's go to war tomorrow. Be ready. It's not a problem. There is no phlegmatism. It's a heresy, they would say. It's laziness. It's a sin. For them, what happens is that they will say it's a sin. They will look at a boy who is phlegmatic and they will call him he's lazy. They will destroy him. They will look at a choleric and they would say, this guy is proud. And they will kill him. They will look at a sanguine and they will say, what a superficial mind. And they will destroy him. And they will look at a melancholy and they would say, what they would say about melancholies? They would say, I don't know. Maybe they wouldn't find any word, but they would destroy him. Well, they would probably say, what a sentimental person. What a sentimental person. So this is spiritualist. We spoke a little bit this morning about the problem of not accepting the idea of temperaments. We have to accept the idea of temperament because this is God's richness. All of us are different because, first of all, we have different temperaments, and it's the beauty of creation. So to deny the temperaments, you want to create saints that are all the same. That's what they do. The spiritualists, they want saints that are all the same face. But the saints have not the same faces because they don't have the same temperaments. And their fight is very different from one another. You understand? So this is a beautiful thing, which is the temperament. It's beautiful. It's God creation. It's the multiplicity of God's in the world. It's a beautiful thing. We have to accept and love the idea of temperaments because it's a sign of God's goodness and richness. And I finish with this slide before entering. Spiritualists deny temperament. They interpret human actions from the exclusive point of the will. They do not perceive the strength and limitations of each temperament. They do not understand that spiritual character is built on physiological temperament. Spiritualists are bad mentors and educators. They confuse physiological tendencies with spiritual defects. They also tend to be boring. They do not grasp that the temperaments are an expression of the richness of God's creation. They tend to love uniformity. Okay, without more details, I want to go directly now to study with you. So discover the virtues you're challenged by. Choleric, we said, are action-oriented, quick, intense, and sustained reactivity. So what's going to happen in terms of prudence? In terms of prudence, they have problems. They don't have problem with decision. Because what is a plus, it means no problem. Whether it's a minus, it means there is a problem. So they have no problem with decision because they exhibit self-confidence and they are very decisive biologically. But they have a difficulty with deliberation because he is prone to rashness, to charge ahead without proper reflection. He tends not to seek advice. Choleric very often don't seek advice. They think they know it all. Yeah. And they feel ashamed of asking for advice. So deliberation is really, if you have a choleric temperament, remember, deliberation is going to be the challenge in terms of prudence. Courage. What's going to be the challenge for you? Well, in terms of courage, you don't have much challenges. Look at that. The choleric he has a tendency to be endurant because he is marked by a sustained reactivity, which means that his reactions are not ephemeral, they are sustained, they are lasting, but at the same time, he is audacious because he has self-confidence. He exhibits self-confidence biologically. So, very often when you see a choleric, and when you see courage in his life, you have to ask yourself, is this courage really? Or biological energy? That's a good question. And you don't know? Of course you cannot know. You cannot know in one action, of course. When you see one action of the guy or the woman, you cannot know. If you know he's choleric, you say, well, it was not so complicated for him to do this. It was not a big challenge. So very often we just don't know. When we don't know well the person, choleric people, to be sure that they have courage, you have to see them in their everyday life, how they behave, how they are endurance, how they are bold, and you come to the conclusion, well, this is more than biology. Because even when he sleeps bad, he's still like this. So it's not a biological energy. He is courageous. When his biology doesn't work, he does still the same thing, which means that he has a spiritual strength that comes from the virtue of courage. You follow me? So when you see those people, when you see the biology is not working for a reason or another, illness, doesn't sleep enough, whatever it is, but they still behave the same way, you can be sure that it is the spiritual strength that comes from the virtue of courage. This is a way to experience the courage in those choleric people. Because they don't have problems, it's easy for them to be endurant and to be bold. So you have to be sure, is this really boldness and courage, endurance? And a way to understand that is when biology doesn't work, what happens? And then you get it. Okay, look at the self-control virtue. So he has no problem with energizing noble passions because he has a strong physiological energy and enthusiasm. So very easily he can energize his passions, but he has to restrain evil passions. And these evil passions that we see very often in choleric people, pride, anger, and hatred. For the choleric people, the emotions, the passions that can destroy them are pride, anger, and hatred. I repeat what I told you yesterday, all the important dictators, famous dictators that we've seen in the world, they are choleric people. The hate is very high. The anger is very high. They have no control of themselves. And they have no control of those passions. Specifically those three passions that are very internal passions. Good people were choleric. Many of them. St. Paul was a choleric. St. Paul the Apostle, he was absolute cholericism. When he was with Mark, sent Mark on a trip, the first trip to Cappadocia, and Mark said, I give up. Then Paul told him, okay, but don't come back to me in the future. And when Mark tried to come back to him in the future, he said, get out of my way. And Mark went to Peter because Paul didn't want Mark anymore. It's finished. With Paul, you couldn't play a game like with a choleric. The cholerics are very serious. When they say something, they stick to their words. So Paul was very, very like that. And his fight was very much about being loving. Because choleric, I told you, they have problem with loving. The others with humility, with serving. They are always on the move, they are always in action, and they forget about people. They are managers. They go for the goal, and Paul went for a goal. To spread Christianity all over Europe. But at the same time, he was a Christian, and he knew, well, I have also to make a certain effort to take care of people. Well, with Mark, it didn't work. Because he probably went to confession. I don't know, but it didn't work at all. And the poor Barnabas, whose feast was yesterday, was absolutely collapsed with this. He couldn't understand that. His nephew there is going back, and Paul is telling him, forget about the trip, but we never see you again. So this is the cholerism. Anger. He was angry. He didn't hate, but he was angry. So this is a good guy, you know. He had to fight in order to have self-control. And he fought. And he's a saint because he's been fighting. But he has his own defects, and he kept them until the very last moment of his life. But Christ needed a guy like this. He wouldn't have with John. He wouldn't have done what he wanted to do. John had another mission, so God gave him another kind of temperament because he needed a guy like Paul to do what had to be done. And he needed just one, not 12. Cholerism, it's a very positive thing, cholerism, especially when it's at the service of God. Justice. No problem with common good, because those choleric people, they can easily strive for the common good through work, family, religion, social work. The choleric people, they like to work, they like to build family, they like religion, they like social life. They are very active people. And this activity makes easy the creation of the common good. Because the common good is something we build. It's not just a state of mind. So choleric people, builders, and they build the common good easily. It's not a big problem for them if they have the right ideas. But they have problems in communication. The choleric tends to be confrontational and dictatorial. It tends to be contemptuous of those who have less energy. It's typical of the choleric when they see a phlegmatic. You know what I mean? What's that? You know? And they tend to be confrontational and dictatorial with people. And they are not afraid of that. And the sanguines, they collapse. When there is a conflict, they collapse. Phlegmatic also. But the choleric, if he doesn't like me, it's not a problem. I don't care for that guy. I can sleep. You know, a sanguine knows that someone doesn't like him. The guy will not sleep the whole night. The whole night. But a choleric just doesn't care for you. He goes for a goal. He doesn't care much for what people think about him. Magnanimity. Well, magnanimity is contemplation and action. So the choleric, you see, has no problem with action because he has self-confidence, and also in contemplation because he is aware of his own talents. So the choleric people have a tendency to be very much aware of their talents, and they have self-confidence, but they have a problem with contemplation. They are prone to blind activism. So if you're a choleric, remember that. You want to be magnanimous, so the challenge for you is going to be contemplation. You need to contemplate more your life. You need to think more about what you're doing. You need to be sure that you're doing what you have to do and not what just you like to do. You have to think if you're doing too much things and not thinking enough about those things. You have to find a real meaning in your work, in your life, before doing those things. You cannot fall into workaholism, into activism, because this is the opposite of what magnanimity is about. It's a virtue to remember of philosophers and doers. So the cholerics have to be more philosophers. This is the challenge for them. They have to be more philosophers. Humility. At the level of self-knowledge, they don't have much problem from one side, from one part of the self-knowledge. They tend to be aware of their talents, as I've told you. It's a part of self-knowledge to be aware of your talents. But from another side, look at that. He tends not to be aware that his talents are God's gifts. He tends not to recognize his mistakes, and he's prone to pride. So the thing with the choleric people is that they are aware of their own talents, but very often they think that their own talents is a result of their own activity. They have difficulties very often to understand that their talent is a gift of God. They feel, this is me, it's the result of my work. You know, they have a tendency to pride. I'm not saying they're proud, but they have a tendency to pride more than other people. And they have a tendency not to recognize their own mistakes. Cholerics don't make mistakes. Always right. Yeah. So they have you see, on the humility side, they have to work a lot. They have to work on the service side because they tend to be confrontational and dictatorial. How can you serve people when you're confrontational and dictatorial? They tend to be contemptuous of those who have less energy. They tend to be insensitive and roll over their co-workers' feeling to accomplish the tasks at hand. They tend not to take the time to mold, convince, or teach the people he's in charge of So the inclusion thing, the empowerment thing, is difficult for the choleric. Because the choleric, he goes for a goal, he has a mission, he goes for it. Material goals, management, he goes for it. And then the people around, they are okay, but they are a little bit instruments for him. A little bit instruments. Biologically speaking, he's not much, much interested in what's going to happen to those people. He's interested in the goal. Are we achieving the goal or not? This is management. I told you he is born a manager. So in order to become a leader, he has to work on the humility side, which is he has to work a lot on how does he care for people. Does he include them? Does he delegate power? Does he empower them? Does he want them to grow? So he has to think a lot about his people. A choleric has to think a lot about people because he naturally thinks about things like a good manager. But he has to think about the people involved in the process. He must help them grow, not destroy them. So this is humility. You follow me? For instance, a choleric doesn't like to delegate power. Why? Because he loves to do things himself. Yeah, he loves, why would I delegate if I can do it myself? He loves action. He loves to have things to do. So the more he has to do, the better he feels. But
not like to be told what to do.
and he has not had to be told what to do. But then he has to think, okay, I like to do things, but I have a lot of people around, my children, my employees. I have to delegate because I want them to grow. So even if I have time to do all those things, and I like to do all those things, and I need to delegate and give this to the others, that they would grow. So the challenge for the melancholy, for the choleric, is very much about humility. Humility has relationship between himself and God, but humility also has relationship between himself and the others. So cholerics are fundamentally challenged by humility. And I brought you an example. Joan of Arc was a humble choleric. In accomplishing the task at hand with determination to drive out the English from French soil, she was a servant of her people. She brought out the greatness in her soldiers. She changed the hearts of millions of her countrymen, engendered the spiritual revival of a whole country. Joan was a great teacher, a wonderful educator. So she was a choleric, but she took care of people better than anybody else. Better than any melancholy would do, better than any sanguine would do. She was all the time on the people side. But she was a great manager. She had a mission, and as a choleric, she did it perfectly. She threw those guys out of French soil. But the interesting thing in leadership is not this. It is the education side. It is how she helped people grow, how she transformed the hearts, the minds of millions of people. And this is because she was humble. This is because she was focused on human beings. She focused on people. She never forgot her mission, her management. She never forgot it. She went for it. But doing this, she always kept her sight on the human beings, on the people. Because she loved the human beings. And this helped her very much also to practice humility. But she was very much speaking about the human. Joan of Arc was speaking all the time about the human aspect of life. She's the one who pronounced for the first time in history those beautiful words, help yourself and God will help you. We used to hear those words, but these words pronounced by this little girl of 17 years old. Help yourself and God will help you. She was helping people rebuild their human structure. Because at that time, France was very, very bad. Not bad because the British were in France, but bad because people were bad. That's the reality of the situation. No hope, no virtue, killed each other. It was a moral decomposition of the whole country. She restored the human. Although she had a spiritual mission that came from God, supernatural mission, she restored the human. She came to bring people back to humanity. Choleric that has humility. Here you have an example. Questions about the choleric? Remember, cholerics, your challenge, it's humility.
Alex, the children tend to have the same temperaments as one or the other or both of their parents, or can they be something?
The grandparents also, because it's biological. So if you're phlegmatic and none of your parents is phlegmatic, you have to think maybe I have a grandfather here that was really like that. So it comes. It's very strange to be a sanguine if both parents are cholerics or melancholies. So it means that it comes from somewhere else. Look at the melancholy. The melancholy has no problem with deliberation because he tends to be deep, reflective, and contemplative. So very often he gets the situation more or less right. But he has also problems in deliberation because he tends to magnify difficulties and he tends to be pessimistic. So the melancholies, they have this capacity to see problems where there is no problem. That's it. They see a lot of difficulties and problems, and we have to tell them, look, 95% of the problems you foresee are not real. So for the melancholy, when you know this, it's just incredible. Because then you know this. I am a melancholy. So 95% of the problems I foresee are not real. It's incredible for a melancholy to know this, because then you understand I no need to be worried about that, because they are not real. You know, they suffer a lot, the melancholies. They suffer, among all those temperaments, they are the ones who suffer the most. Because they see problems everywhere, they feel sadness, pessimism. It's a heavy life. It's a heavy life, but they produce beautiful things. They produce beautiful things. They are deep people. They have problem with decision. The melancholy fears action in which human perfection becomes manifest and looks for certainty and tends to be indecisive. This is the big challenge for the melancholy. It's action, so a decision. Hamlet. Hamlet was a melancholy. Absolute melancholy type. He couldn't make a decision. Look at this guy. He's a great actor, by the way. By the way, it's an English actor. I don't remember his name. He's still alive. But in his face and in his eyes, you have exactly what melancholy is about. He does it perfectly. You know, you don't really know what he's looking at, because he's looking inside himself. He's looking at nothing. He's looking inside himself. So this is melancholy, people. Okay, so in prudence, melancholy needs to remember, I need to make a decision. I cannot be Hamlet. Courage. Well, melancholy have no problem with endurance because they tend to be consistent, faithful, patient, and persistent. Why? Because they are deep. And they tend to handle the big crisis easily. That's right. In ordeals, melancholies are very strong, much stronger than the choleric. Melancholies, they can handle any kind of crisis. They are very strong people because they are deep and they can understand the meaning of their ordeals easier than the others. So this is why they are very attractive personalities. Their capacity for endurance is enormous at the biological level because they are deep and they understand well what's going on. They suffer biologically and they're used to it. In melancholies, the experience of the cross, for instance, gives always incredible results because they have a predisposition for that. But they have a problem with audacity because it tends to focus on all the difficulties of a new venture. It tends to be overly cautious. It tends to worry about things that are not important. And his fear of the future tends to stimulate his activity. They are afraid of the future. They see difficulties everywhere. They want certainties. So they are not biologically audacious. They have to know this. If you are a melancholy, you need to think. I need to stop reading my books, writing my stuff, and I need to act. So I need from time to time to get out of my house and move forward and be with people and do things and dream about things and move a little bit, yeah? So the melancholies need to move. And the melancholy need to move a lot. They need to they need to make a lot of sports. More than the others. The cholerics, they do their sports all the day. But the melancholies, they need to make a lot of sports because they have a tendency to be self-absorbed and they become crazy. You can become very crazy if you're a melancholy and you don't get outside yourself. You need to go out. You need to see people. You need to stop thinking about yourself. You need to be in the wood. You need to be with people. If not, you're with yourself every day, all the time, and you just collapse. Yeah. They are introvert people. Everything is inside. But they are very deep at the same time. So they are not like the phlegmatic. They are introvert, but they are not deep. So the melancholy is introvert, but it's deep. So things are inside. And they don't get out like that. So they need to find ways to bring these people to the woods. So melancholies are fundamentally challenged by audacity. Martin Luther King was a bold melancholy. Intense melancholia was one of the most striking features of his personality. But Martin Luther King overcame his fears and took direct action as a leader of the African American civil rights movement. Luther King is very critical. He's a melancholy 100%. By the way he writes, his preaching, his speeches from Birmingham's jail, these are incredible stuff. This is the stuff that only a melancholy can write. It's beautiful. But this guy became a mover and shaker of humanity. And this is not normal. This doesn't fit the guy. I mean, this doesn't fit the biology of the guy. So how do you become a mover and shaker when you are biologically a melancholy like him? Well, you work on yourself and you bring close to you people that are choleric to learn from them. And this is what Martin Luther King did. He brought people, I don't know the quality of those guys, but I know he brought people close to him who are really cholerics, and he learned from them. He learns to move towards action and not just sit in a chair in a jail and write homilies. So you have here an example of a melancholy who was a doer, but he was not born a doer. He became a doer by working on himself and out of righteous wrath. You see how righteous wrath came in and moved him forward and made him a real doer because it acted on audacity. He became audacious out of righteous wrath, but he was not born audacious. He was very far from that. It was not his way of being on a biological way, on the biological level. So he became. It's a result of a transformation. It's a result of a work on yourself. So it's possible to be a melancholy and to be a great doer. But for this, you have to work on yourself. You have to work on the virtue of audacity, boldness, self-control. While he has no problem in energizing noble passions, because he tends to value all that is noble, but he has difficulties with the control of internal passions like pessimism, anxiety, sadness, critical spirit, susceptibility. I told you that the choleric have problems with pride and anger. Okay, the melancholy has problems with pessimism, anxiety, sadness, critical spirit, susceptibility. These are all the kinds of passions. They are different. We have to know this, and he has to fight against that. These people can hold grudges for a long time, for years. They don't get out because they are deep people. So things get in, go down, and how do you get that out? You don't know. Okay, so this is a direction for self-control. control of certain internal passions. Justice, common good, it's the same thing. He can easily strive for the common good because he is idea-oriented. I mean, the choleric, he does things, so it's easy for him to build the common good. But for the melancholy, what's easy for him, it's to have an idea of the common good. Do you know what I mean? At least to have at first an idea what is the common good that we have to desire. He has a desire for the common good. He's very idealistically minded. The thing is that he will need also to act in order to build it. So if he builds audacity, he will easily build the common good. But he has on the communication side problems because he tends to be excessively critical of others and bear grudges for a long time. These people can commit sins against charity very easily because of their critical spirit. He tends to be a bad team player and to do things his own way. Yeah, they are very bad team players, the melancholy. Why? Because in a team they feel a lack of personal dignity. I am like the others. How awful is this? You know what I mean? They have a deep sense of personal dignity and they don't feel happy in a team. They want to do things their own way. And if you tell them to do like the others do, they feel humiliated. The Sanguines love it. They love teams. They love being in a team. The Sanguines, the Italians, play tennis, play football together. It's a team, it's fantastic. A melancholy in a team, he doesn't know what to do because he wants to do what the others don't do. That's the problem. Why? Because if not, he feels humiliated. I am not a number. In a team, you have number 1, number 2, number 3. In a football team, and number 11. Soccer. These guys say, I'm not a number. What will he do come sport? He will go swimming alone. 10 kilometers. I myself, I do my things. And he will be a great swimmer. And he will get the gold medal, but not in soccer or in football. You see the bad team players, and they have to know it. And Teresa of Avila knew this when she saw nuns in a monastery, and she saw some of the melancholies nuns. She said, "These women are incredible. They always go their own way. They do things their own way. For a choleric, it's unacceptable." So when you know those things, you understand, well, don't put him in a team. It's not for him. He's an artist. He's a piano player. He's a guerrillero. He's not for the normal army. He's for the mountains. He's for the woods. He does things by himself. You know, you have to understand this is the spirit of the melancholy people. Do you have still questions, Maria?
When you talk about things coming in and staying deep, as much as grudges can do that, how about hurt? Abusive childhood and pain where there's no trust.
Yeah.
Very typical for this type of person to hold it all in.
Yeah, they keep things inside a lot. That's why you must not offend a melancholic few times. Just once. Once is enough. But if you offend him a few times, for all his life, he keep the image of you in his mind, and he will never forgive you. They cannot forgive. To forgive for melancholy is an act of heroism, and to forget, to forgive and to forget, mostly to forget is an act of heroism, because he cannot forget, because he's a deep person. So everything goes very, very deep inside, and he turns around and he looks at you from very different angles. And every time he thinks about you, even if he doesn't see you, he hates you. That's why I told you the melancholies can commit sins against charity very easily. If they don't control their memory, they need to control memory a lot, because they have an incredible memory, these people. They need to control it. And they need to be able to forget certain things in order to be capable of forgiving and beginning something new again, a new life, a new relationship with people, because the grudges they bear inside themselves are very heavy. It's a burden for them, but it's also a sin. That's the problem. So it's really heroism for a melancholy to say, okay, I forgive you, I try to forget, let's begin again. This is heroism for a melancholy, absolute heroism. For the other temperaments, it's not a big problem, it's not a big challenge, but for the melancholy, it's a big challenge. They are very susceptible, they have a sense of personal dignity, you don't understand them, you don't respect them, they feel very unhappy with that. Very unhappy. But at the same time, it's because of this depth of their spirit that they can produce incredible things. Piece of arts, thoughts, ideas, things that can shake and move humanity. You know, the choleric, they build, but you have to give them an idea. And this idea fundamentally comes from the melancholies. The melancholies will never build. They will produce, but they will not build. The builders are the entrepreneurs, the managers, the cholerics. But those who change the world by ideas, these are the melancholies. They break the status quo. Yeah, because they are deep and they produce something new. So we need those people. Of course we need them. But they have their own limitations. And we have to know them. And we have to know about those limitations. Magnanimity. So for contemplation, he has no problem in magnanimity because he tends to be aware of his personal dignity, he tends to be aware of his talents, and he tends to fix his sight on the highest and noblest of goals, which is idealistically minded. So he has no problem in contemplation in terms of magnanimity. But for action, he will have problems. He fears action in which human imperfection becomes manifest. What happens? It is that a melancholy, he loves perfection because he's idealistically minded. He loves the idea. And he knows as soon as we put the idea into practice, it loses perfection. Because human beings, we are what we are. A beautiful idea in the hands of human beings becomes something not so beautiful. So he's afraid of implementation of ideas. He's afraid. What he delights in is the idea itself, not the implementation of the idea. So he's afraid of action, because in action he sees imperfection. And that's a natural tendency, it's a biological tendency. He does not like to run risks, he looks for certainty, and he tends to be pessimistic, to magnify difficulties, to fear the unknown. And this is, of course, an obstacle in terms of magnanimity, which is the virtue not only of contemplation, but the virtue of action. So you see, the interesting thing in all those types is that you see that nobody can say, I have a problem with one virtue. No, you have a problem with one aspect of a virtue. But you cannot say, I have a problem with the whole virtue. No. In that virtue, there are certain things that are easy for you and other things that are complicated for you. So don't say this guy has this temperament, so he will have this problem in terms of that virtue. No, a specific aspect of the virtue will be a problem for him. Humility. In terms of self-knowledge, things go well because he tends to be aware of his talents, and he tends to be aware that his talents are gifts from God. This is an interesting thing. Choleric have a tendency to recognize their talents, but they also a tendency to think that their talents are a result, a product of their own activity. The melancholies, he will say, no, of course it's not my activity. It's a gift from God. You need the difference. The melancholy feels dignified in saying it's a gift from God. I am divine, will say the melancholy. My gifts are divine. I'm a writer. I speak to my muse. She tells me what to write. I'm inspired by God. You know, melancholy will speak that way. He will never say, this is my gift, I've produced it. He is dignified by the idea that this comes from God. He's a poet, he's a writer, he's a thinker, whatever it is. He has inspirations. And those inspirations come from God, from the divine, whatever it is. And he feels happy with that. And this is the truth. All those gifts come from God. So he's the truth. So he's humble from that point of view. But from the point of view of service, he has problems because he has a tendency to be self-absorbed. And that's the biggest challenge for the melancholies. It's self-absorption. He's absorbed by what? He's absorbed by his feelings, by his thoughts, by his deeds, by himself. Self-absorption. That's why these guys can become crazy. As I told you, you have to send them to the wood, to the nature. Priests in confession must send those people. I knew a priest in Moscow, he sent people to the woods as a confession. The punishment, I would say in English, the punishment. The penance, you go to the wood the whole day. You don't come back to Moscow until the end of the day. This is your penance. I knew a priest was like this, and he did very well. Because you have a lot of melancholies in Russia. And these guys need to get out of themselves. And the way to get them out of themselves is send them to the wood. Yeah, but priests need to know those things. Well, and I guess many knows already feel it. Maybe they don't have the words that I'm using, but they understand perfectly what we're speaking about. You have the Mexican woman who goes to confession and tells, my husband, my son. But then you have the melancholic people who say, I, me. You know what I mean? Me. It's more complicated to get outside yourself than to get rid of your son or your husband. You have to get rid of yourself. This is the problem with the melancholies. How do you get rid of yourself? To get rid of yourself, you need to be entertained. They hate entertainments, those people. You give a Harry Potter to a melancholy, you say, what's that shit? Of course. They say, you know what I mean? This is very different kind of different people. So service is difficult for them because in order to serve, you need to overcome yourself. You need to think about the others. You need to be with them. You need to listen to them. You need to speak to them. You need to love them. Well, the melancholy has a tendency to be absorbed by himself. So he doesn't see the others. He doesn't see them. The cholerics, very often, they treat people badly, but they see them. The melancholic is that they just don't see them. You can have a get-together with 20 people. Somebody speaking about a beautiful thing. Everybody listen. You have one melancholy here. We have the impression he listens. When during 2 hours he was thinking about something else. He was outside. He was completely outside. When a sanguine is outside, you see it immediately. In his face, he's not with you. He's doing something else. He's whatever it is. But the melancholy doesn't need to be outside. He just needs to get in. Inside himself, it's finished. He's out. You don't see that he's out, but he's absolutely out. The guy can be 2 hours. What did we speak about today? Well, I don't remember it. Remind me. He's been thinking about something else in 2 hours, and you've not noticed this. It's the capacity of the human spirit of those melancholies, self-absorption. I don't need people who need to think, okay, I have a tendency to self-absorption, so I need to make an effort to just think more about people, pray more about people, about concrete people, call people, write to people, speak to people, be with them, my friends, my colleagues, be interested in their things. It's, for a melancholy, it's an effort. It's not easy. It demands work. Work on yourself. And we are close to finish. Hey, we finished. Okay, so for the melancholies, the challenge is audacity. For the choleric, the challenge is going to be humility.